So I received some messages in regards to discussing further personal magnetism, and so today I titled the mind map, Projected in Space to the One Whom You Think. Now, these quotes are from one of my favorite Neville books, Prayer, the Art of Believing. Your consciousness is the light reflected on the mirror of your mind and projected in space to the one whom you think. Now, it's important to go back to some of the fundamentals of what we discussed. To the visionary, the vision is a fact in imagination. He says our subconscious assumptions continually externalize themselves that others may consciously see us as we subconsciously see ourselves and tell us by their actions what we have subconsciously assumed of ourselves to be. So, one of the joys of this journey is self-discovery. We discovered that we are identifying with, so there's a part of us that's observing. Perhaps if a person is communicating with someone and they say, I am awkward, although they're saying this unconsciously, they see it play out in the behaviors and emotional patterns and how others relate with them. Others reveal that which we imagine about ourselves and them. And if we have these kinds of experiences, we recognize that we are transcendent to those beliefs, as an I or formless self is via our own subconscious beliefs, identifying with certain thinking patterns that are not true and resonant with how we are. So it's important then to, in those moments, let the state of mind that's ideal to the vision be, which sometimes I refer to as surrendering to the vision realized. See yourself, imagine yourself as your ideal in that moment, and you will observe that your behaviors change, your emotional patterns change, your thinking patterns in relation to the other person changes, and thus how they relate to us changes. As he says here, your consciousness modified by your beliefs objectifies itself in the conditions of your world. I've seen this happen again and again, and this is something that is discussed in communication programs, neuro-linguistic programming. Although they might use different terminologies and ways of explaining it, the same thing is happening. The change happens in consciousness. A person selects a state of mind. They enter into the state of mind. And the power of working with Neville's information regularly, as I've seen the benefits as well, is that we notice that it is easier to identify what we are identifying with and recognize the state of mind that is representative of the aspect that we're identifying with, and then switch our state of mind into one that we feel resonant with. As a person does this and continues to return back to the states that are ideal, doing this in interaction, in conversation, and actually even outside of interaction, because perhaps we're imagining people in our mind all day long, and how are we imagining them? Are we imagining them from the perspective of love, harmony, peace, or are we imagining them from the perspective of conflict, argumentation of the intellect, which in those moments we are identifying with, and we're entering those states of mind. And then perhaps we'll experience that theater playing out in our interactions with others. So we change our world by changing how we see ourselves relating with others. So attention then is very important, because this allows us to recognize what we are saying I am to subconsciously, and it plays out in our mind all throughout the day. We can see it. We can observe the inner dialogues, what we're imagining about others. And then we see the correlation when we relate to them play out as the theater in the relationships. So putting our attention on the vision, which again is fact and imagination, and what he encourages, and I also further encourage, as stated in the Hermetica, we were given two gifts, speech and mind, and that they were equal to immortality. And we can fill up the mind with anything, whether ones via our own beliefs, attitudes, interpretations, etc., filling up our mind in relation to others, in relation to ourselves. And the contents of mind expresses accordingly, as he says here. Your consciousness is the light reflected on the mirror of your mind and projected in space to the one whom you think. So what are the contents of the mind? The speech. And that's what we're giving life to, light to. We're entering that state. We're giving it life. Or as perhaps a person continues to dwell upon things that are not in harmony with how they truly are. They're giving that light. And so we want to practice the conscious use of the two gifts of speech and mind. So every day we have an opportunity to practice keeping our attention on the vision, which, as I talked about in Thursday's video, one of the ways that I do this is to make flow a priority. The various initiatives, the tasks, the projects, in relation to my goals, in relation to my definite chief aim, in relation to my vision, allows me to intentionally put my mind on something that I love, that I consciously desire to put my mind on, and I feel a certain way. Thoughts, ideas, inspirations during those experiences are true and authentic to how I actually see myself to be, ideal in my vision. And through remaining in that state, that becomes the self-image. And one of the effects of that is those thinking processes that go on while I'm in flow represent the completion within. As we've discussed before in the work by Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, he refers to this as autotelic. You're there because you want to be there. In a way, you're not doing this for a reason, even though we know that some way, somehow, it's related to the vision. It's actually viscerally, experientially practicing completion, embodying the self-image of completion. And then what I notice is when I think about others, I think accurately from the perspective of love and harmony, because for a majority of the day, I've allowed my attention to go on what is important. I allow my attention to consciously go, working with the two gifts of speech and mind, on what I consciously desire. And the belief that this is forming for me is that I'm complete inside, which then plays out as completion in relationships. I noticed over the years that relationships with others became harmonious because I'm actually remaining, doing what I love to do, in the ideal state of mind, as he says here. Whatever state has your attention holds your life. Now, if this state holds my attention, or I keep my attention on the state, then whatever is contained within that state, the emotional patterns, behavioral patterns, thinking patterns, is forming my self-image. And also as part of my journey, I interact with people, and I'm able to find flow in the interactions. And by experiencing flow in the interactions, I experience people ideally in harmony with the vision. I'm in harmony with their goals, their visions, and then they're in harmony with my goals. And what we see is we say the same things. We come to the same conclusions and experience a harmony of the mind. As he says here, recognition of a state vibrates or awakens it. Distance, as it is cognized by your objective senses, does not exist for the subjective mind. The vision seems to draw people together. And Napoleon Hill in Think and Grow Rich called this the mastermind. There's a harmonious relationship and conversations, and there's no awkwardness, overly critical of myself, perfectionism, anxiety, or stress. Rather, there's the reflection of the affirmation in mind. As we say, reality is the affirmation in mind, which is the vision, which plays out as the interaction with others. And as I'm relating with others in this way, this becomes my self-image of how I relate with others. Because by remaining in the state, everything changes. Beliefs, attitudes of mind, everything changes. So we see then what he says here, which I really like. He says, never accept as true of others what you would not want to be true of you. To awaken a state within another, it must first be awakened within you. The state you would transmit to another can only be transmitted if it is believed by you. Therefore, to give is to receive. So as mentioned, I've studied communication, sales, marketing, NLP for many years, and all of these different bodies of work and Neville's work seem to point to this same conclusion, which is to awaken a state within another, it must be first awakened within us. Actually, in NLP, there's a saying, you go first. So if I found myself feeling awkward, not smart enough, hard time deciding, overly critical, perfectionism, anxiety, and stress, I recognize that I'm in a state of mind that's not authentic and true to how I am. And I imagine what would imply. Or I bring myself into the feeling. I feel in that moment. You can do this via thinking, you can do this via feeling, or a combination, thinking, feelingly. And you bring yourself back into the state, and you notice then when you're in that state, when you're interacting with others, they reflect it in their behaviors and how they relate to you and how you relate to them. And I like what he says here because I've noticed this as well. He says, distance, as it is cognized by your objective senses, does not exist for the subjective mind. So I notice that when I'm in a state of mind that's resonant and true, how I authentically am, that more people reach out to me, tend to call me out of the blue, want to hang out. I used to notice before, back in the days when I was in a state of mind where I felt incomplete and played out the awkwardness and not smart enough, hard time deciding, overly critical, and perfectionism, that the theater reflection of that, as reality is the affirmation in mind, was it appeared that they didn't want to be around me. It appeared that they were avoiding me. And in this state of mind, which is revealed by the thinking patterns, which are again, and he refers to Philippians 4:8, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever are of good report, if there be any virtue, if there be any praise, think on these things. I notice that wherever I go, I experience harmonious interactions. I notice that they say the same things, the mastermind. And it's true for personal life, business life, all areas of our life. So in conclusion, it's important to maintain a state of mind that is ideal, that is authentic to how you are, because everything happens automatically from that premise. The ideal prosperity, the relationships, the friendships, they play out from that state of mind that is ideal, in which you feel at home with, in which you feel resonant with. And I always recommend making that a priority. As he says, recognition of a state vibrates or awakens it. Distance, as it is cognized by your objective senses, does not exist for the subjective mind. You notice people reach out to you. As we've discussed, I believe all subconscious minds are connected. And as he says, and going back to the beginning here, your consciousness is the light reflected on the mirror of your mind and projected in space to the one whom you think. And this is true for those that we directly think about, and also bringing about those that through thinking in a certain way, for example, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever are of good report, actually brings those individuals into your life. So I trust you found this video to be helpful and complementary to our recent Neville conversations on the same topic in regards to relating with others, which I'll put a link in the description to a number of videos discussing the same topic and covering it from different perspectives. Again, going back to the same premise, which is your beliefs, your fixed attitudes of mind constantly modify your consciousness as it is reflected on the mirror of your mind. Your consciousness, modified by your beliefs, objectifies itself in the conditions of your world. To change your world, you must first change your conception of it. And as we relate to Thursday's video, revealing the true and authentic self-image, and you know what that means to you, that automatically expresses as the ideal relationships in the different areas of our life. So now let's go ahead and conclude today's video with an auto-suggestion to further encourage. We can say, I recognize my ability to identify with the true and accurate beliefs, interpretations, assumptions, ideal to who I really am from the perspective of completion within in imagination, recognizing that I'm complete within, and from the feeling and thinking of completion within, everything plays out automatically in relationship with others. Recognizing that this ideal state holds my attention in my life, which represents whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are of good report. And by awakening this state in myself, it is experienced as the same state awakening in others, and is the light reflected on the mirror of my mind projected in space to the one of whom I think. From the perspective of love and good report. If you would like a copy of this mind map, the link is in the description. Thank you very much for watching. I'll talk to you soon. Take care.